It has been more than 10 years since Jim Mcgreevey stepped down as the governor of New Jersey. And since then, he's made a new life for himself, and he's also helping many people make new lives for themselves. Mcgreevey, he is now director of the Jersey City Employment and Training Program, where he helps prisoners with re-entry into society. He says America's high incarceration rates for African Americans is like a moral cancer. He sat down with our Dominic just a short time ago.
As a nation, you think of the moral cancer. In America, we're imprisoning more African Americans, more African American men than South Africa locked up black South Africans at the height of apartheid. And so what that means is we're destroying the entire fabric of a community. And so what happens to their children? The children of imprisoned are 6 times more likely themselves to be incarcerated. So, we're growing the cancer instead of treating it and healing it and shrinking the problem. So, reentry is messy stuff. It's making sure people are getting educated and living in sober housing and having health care and having a license and working, the dignity of work. It takes work to do that. It's easy to put people in prison, but you have to understand when we're putting in prison more black Americans than South Africa did at the height of apartheid, we're, as it says in the gospel, you shall reap what you shall sow. We're sowing the seeds of our own moral cancer in the community.
Governor Mcgreevey, why do you do what you do?
It's funny you ask. When I was in seminary, after I stepped down as governor, this wise old priest said, you should think about going up to Harlem at a place called Exodus Transitional Ministry. I said, why? He said, man, it'd be good for you. And so I went up there, and it was sort of a church front operation, working with guys who were coming out of Sing Sing and New York State prisons and federal prisons. And I realized that these guys wanted the same things I did. They wanted a roof over their head. They wanted a good meal. They wanted a good opportunity for their children. And I also realized that many of them started the race of life from a very different starting point than I did. And if given the opportunity, they could change their lives. And so I related to them in the sense that, I was broken, I was frustrated, I was saddened, and so now how to work together to reshape our lives.
Not many of us, Governor, acknowledge that we were broken, and yet you do it with no problem.
Well, I think it's part of it's faith. Part of it's my Christian sense of values, to realize that, God has given us the gift of the freedom of choice, and we make good, godly decisions, and sometimes we make decisions that serve the self, serve the ego. And so to acknowledge that is healthy, and to try to work diligently to make more godly decisions.
Is it fair to say, Governor, that you have found a new calling?
Sure. I think, it happens hopefully with wisdom, I'll be 60 next year. As you get older, you think about what's important. What are you going to leave behind? What is the earth, is the country, is the nation, is the community, is your family going to be better off for you having traveled this way? And how can you do it? And so, working with people that frankly lived here today, many of the men spent 25, 30 years behind bars. And now they come into this place, somebody's helping them with their license, somebody's helping them get a job, securing a roof over their head. It's very rewarding, and to watch them turn away from a life of running and gunning and doping and living a more godly life. It doesn't get any better.
But Governor, instead of prisoner re-entry in Jersey City, let's be honest, you could be out there in the private sector making a ton of money.
Well, but what do you do with that? And you go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and you look at the pharaohs and you look at all the things they try to transport to the next life, and it didn't happen. And so, as my grandmother would say, the only things that last are things that are done with love. Not to quote again, but Winston Churchill said, you make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give. And so it's about trying to diligently be in a place of service, and God willing, that yields great gifts, great abundance to me personally.
Governor, between me and you, do you miss politics?
I miss the people. I miss the give and take. I miss the VFW halls. I miss Little Leagues. I miss going out and spending time, and whether it's, it's a state park or, a community or church event, traveling, seeing the goodness of people. Yeah, I miss that. That's what I most miss about it.
Do you miss serving as governor of this great state?
No, I think this is where, it sounds corny, but I think this is where God wants for me to be. And, by virtue of having relationships with mayors and senators and blessed the governor, that we can bring change. And so the people with whom I have the privilege of working, or many of them are in pain. And so it's helping them to alleviate that pain and to walk, God willing, a more healthy path.
I have watched you, Governor, the last couple of months, the way that people react to you out in the street. It remains rock star status for you. And that's interesting. But I want to close on this note. How bad is the problem of incarceration in America?
Well, I think it's a moral cancer. I think it's one of the great failings of our nation.
Moral cancer, strong words.
Oh, we're willing to spend $74 billion a year to lock up. Literally, we lock up 1% of our population. The cost, $74 billion a year. And then people get out and they don't have all the support. Guys that max out of prison walk out and have nothing. And so the goal is, you go back to colonial America, people after they committed a crime were put in the stockades, they did their time, and then from a Christian perspective, they were forgiven. They were brought back into the community. They could marry, they could work, and they lived the fullness of their lives. And today, when somebody does time, there's a whole host of barriers, programs that they're not eligible for, support, financial support that they're precluded from, college loans that they're ineligible for a young guy who maybe distributed a drug and now he can never get certain kinds of college loans. So we have to think that if we want to bring people back into healthy, constructive living, we can't punish them for for an eternity. We have to punish them for a limited period of time and then help them get back, help them go from being a prisoner to a taxpayer, help them going from a person who abused the trust of society to living a righteous life. The goal is not to punish in perpetuity. The goal is to bring back someone so that their gifts can be returned to civic society.
We come back, we'll take a look at some local headlines. Stay with us.